The gallery was not a bad place to sit. If you had no pride left. Dalehurst had plenty of pride. He sat anyway. The chairs were made for bodies that were not human, too wide slightly, curved in the wrong direction, built for species whose spines bent in ways that did not bear thinking about. Dale sat straight in his, arms on his knees, and watched the Grand Council chamber the way he used to watch foreign ports from the deck of a ship, cataloging, measuring, counting exits. There were 4 exits from the chamber floor, 2 from the gallery. The ambient hum of the station's ventilation system ran at a frequency that would cover a low caliber discharge probably, but nothing heavier. The ceiling was 40 m up and made of something that looked like frosted glass, but wasn't. It caught the light of the star outside and broke it into colors that had no names in English. It was by any measure an extraordinary room. Dale thought it would make a difficult defensive position. Below him on the chamber floor, the session was running. The Grand Council of the Galactic Convergence had been in session for 3 hours. 17 species, 41 delegates, 1 agenda. Trade dispute between the Kethri and a mining collective from the outer bands that Dale had already stopped following. 20 minutes in, the language was translated through the small device clipped behind his ear. Flat, toneless voice that turned every alien tongue into something that sounded like a legal document being read by someone who had never felt anything. He was not the only human in the gallery. Lieutenant Commander Nadia Cross sat 2 seats to his left, her field notebook open on her knee, her pen held loosely between 2 fingers. She had not written anything in 40 minutes. She was watching the Veth delegate the way a person watches something they are trying to figure out before it figures out them. The Veth delegate's name was Sir Valaneth, and he was the oldest living member of the council, and he moved through the chamber like a tide, unhurried, certain its direction. He was tall, pale as old bone, with 4 upper limbs that he kept folded close to his body unless he needed to make a point. When he made a point, 1 limb would extend slowly, and the chamber would go quiet before he had even spoken. He had perfected the art of being obeyed without ever raising his voice. 3 hours ago, a human trade proposal had been placed before the council. A small thing, preferential access to 3 transit corridors in the mid-bands, something the human fringe settlements needed badly, something that had been in negotiation for 11 months. Sir Valaneth had let the human liaison finish speaking. Then 1 limb had extended briefly, and he had said 4 words in Veth, and the translator in Dale's ear had rendered them as "the proposal lacks merit." That was it. No vote. No discussion. 4 words and 11 months of work folded quietly into the floor. The human liaison, a young diplomat named Cole, first posting still, believing in the process, had sat back down and stared at his notes for a long time. Dale had watched him, had not said anything. Nadia had opened her notebook and not written anything. That was 60 years of humanity's relationship with the Galactic Convergence Council compressed into 1 afternoon. They had been admitted as provisional members, a designation that had never been formally reviewed, never been upgraded. Provisional. The word had a patient, polite cruelty to it, like a door left slightly open so You could never stop hoping. They sat in the gallery. They submitted proposals. The proposals lacked merit. They were, the council had decided, a species past its violent phase, no longer dangerous, not yet useful. Somewhere in the long adolescence, between primitive and civilized. Worth watching. Worth tolerating. Not worth seating at the table where real decisions happened. Down on the chamber floor, the trade dispute between the Kethri and the mining collective was winding toward a conclusion that had clearly been decided before anyone walked in. The Kethri delegate, small, feathered, gray-white with age, sat very still through the reading of the verdict. When it came, it went against them. They had known it would. Dale could tell by the way the delegates' feathers had been sitting flat all session, pressed close and tight, the way a bird sits in rain. Then the Kethri delegate looked up at the gallery, not at Cole, not at the other human observers, at Nadia. It lasted 2 seconds, maybe 3. The delegate's eyes, amber large, liquid, found Nadia's face and held it. And there was something in that look that Dale didn't have words for but recognized. He had seen it in the faces of people being left behind. Then the session moved on. Nadia wrote one word in her notebook. Dale didn't look at what it was. The session ran another 30 minutes before Servalan, if declared it closed. The chamber began to empty slowly. Delegates and their aides drifting toward the side corridors, quiet conversations, the particular murmur of people who knew each other very well and had known each other for a very long time. Humans were not part of those conversations. They were background furniture in the gallery. Dale stood, stretched his back against the wrongly shaped chair and said, 60 years and they still seat us in the gallery. You say that every session, Nadia said. It's true every session. She closed the notebook. Cole's going to file another appeal. Cole's going to learn. She looked at him sideways. He was already looking at the chamber floor below, at the table where Servalan, if it just sat at the exact spot where the human proposal had died in 4 words. Something in Dale's expression was the same as it always was. Flat, dry, a face that had decided a long time ago not to spend energy on things it could not change. But he was spinning his wedding ring. Slow rotation around his finger, almost absent the way some men tap a foot or click a pen. Nadia knew him well enough to know that meant he was counting something. What is it? She asked. He stopped spinning the ring. Nothing yet. That was when his comm went off. Priority red. The kind of tone that made the air in a room feel different. He pulled it out, read the screen. Read it again. His face did not change, not even a tightening around the eyes, not a single muscle that shifted from its resting position. Nadia watched him anyway because she knew what to look for. His thumb went still on the comm screen. He did not look at the chamber below. He looked at the star outside the frosted glass ceiling, the one whose light broke into colors with no names. Dale, she said. Get Lou, he said. Tell him to run a quiet pre-flight. Don't file a departure request yet. What is it? He pocketed the comm, picked up his jacket from the back of the wrong-shaped chair. Carver Bell missed its check-in, he said. She opened her mouth, closed it. The Carver Bell was a colony ship. Families. One of the fringe runs, underfunded and Undermanned, the kind of ship that never made the news unless something happened to it. It should have checked in 14 hours ago. And she said because Dale did not pull Lou out of bed for a missed check-in. He looked at her. And the last thing on its signal log, he said, is a sound. He didn't explain what kind of sound. He walked toward the gallery exit. Nadia stood there for one moment, notebook in hand, looking down at the chamber floor where the session had just ended, where Servalan aide was stacking documents with the slow care of someone who believed he had all the time in the world. She opened her notebook, wrote nothing, followed Dale out. The Carver bell was not hard to find. That was the first wrong thing. A missing ship should be hard to find. Space is not a pond. It does not give up what it takes without a fight. Ships that go dark drift, spin, scatter debris across thousands of kilometers of nothing. They hide in the dark the way small animals hide in tall grass. Finding them takes time and luck in equal measure. The Ardent sensors picked up the Carver bell in 40 minutes. It was just sitting there. Dale stood at the bridge viewport and looked at it, a standard colony hauler. Mid-class, a little battered the way all fringe ships were battered, like something that had been used hard and maintained on a budget and kept flying through determination alone. No visible damage. No burn marks on the hull. All the running lights still on, blinking their slow, patient rhythm. Green and white against the black. Hull integrity, Dale said. The sensor officer, a young man named Pete, 26, from somewhere in Colorado. The kind of quiet that came from being genuinely focused rather than having nothing to say, ran the check twice before answering. 100%, sir. No breaches. No fractures. Atmospheric seals intact. Life signs. Pete ran it again. Looked at his screen for a moment longer than he needed to. No, sir. The ship was whole and the people were gone. Not the bodies. Not the remains. The people. 412 of them, families mostly, headed for a fringe settlement 2 weeks out. Children. Old people. Everyone who had packed everything they owned into the cargo hold of a second-hand ship because the fringe was cheap and the promise of land was real. And the Convergence Council did not extend its better trade routes to humans anyway, so you went where you could afford to go. 412 people, and the ship sat there intact. And there was nothing inside it that had ever been alive. Lou Petty ran the internal sweep himself. He came back to the bridge in his work clothes, a granola bar in one hand, and stood next to Dale and looked out at the caravel bell with the expression of a man who had seen a great many things go wrong and recognized this as a new category. 8 from the inside, he said. Dale looked at him. Lou chewed once. Every organic surface gone. Furniture, food stores, the plants in the hydroponics bay, the algae in the water recyclers. A pause. The people. But not the hull. Not the hull. Not the wiring. Not the metal or the synthetic materials. Just the organic. Lou took another bite of his granola bar, seemed to consider it, then put it in his pocket. Precise. Whatever did it was very precise. Nadia had been in the doorway for the last part of that. Dale didn't have to look to know she had gone still. He could tell by the way the room felt, the particular quality of Silence that came from someone trying very hard not to react. Nadia, he said. I know what this is, she said. She walked to the sensor console. Pete moved aside without being asked. She pulled up the chemical trace. Analysis from the sweep Lou had run. Passive residue, particulate, atmospheric remnants, and looked at the breakdown for 30 seconds. She closed her notebook. Set it on the console edge. It's the shroud, she said. The name didn't mean anything to Pete. He looked between Dale and Nadia with the careful attention of someone learning that the world has a room in it they didn't know about. It meant something to Lou. He looked at the Carver Bell through the viewport without blinking. It meant something to Dale. He said nothing for a moment. Then how sure? The chemical signature is specific. The feeding pattern is specific. She pulled up a comparison file from her research archives, something she had built herself over years of xenobiology. Postings, a collection of documented shroud encounters. The file was not long. There had not been many documented encounters. The ones that had been documented had not left many people to write the documentation. This is what they leave. Intact structures, sterile organic surfaces, and this trace compound. She pointed at a number on the screen. They exude it when they feed. It's the only sign they were ever there. Dale looked at the number. The council knows about them. Yes. Their threat classification. Nadia was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that answered the question before the words did. Then, migratory feeding phenomenon. Lou made a sound that was not quite a word. Migratory feeding phenomenon, Dale repeated. Fled. Even. The way he repeated things that had not yet finished becoming what they were. It means they move through an area, consume available organic material, and continue on, Nadia said. The council classified it as a natural event, like a storm, like a tide. She looked at the Carver Bell through the viewport. Not a threat, just a thing that happens. It happened to 412 people. Dale did not say. He pulled up the star chart instead. Ran his finger along the shroud's 3 documented trajectories. Nadia had the file. He pulled it from her archive and looked at where they pointed. He was quiet for a long time. Pete stood very still at his console, watching, learning the shape of what focus looked like in a person who did not waste a single unit of it. What's the vector? Dale asked. Nadia pulled up the trajectory, ran the calculation, looked at the answer. Cradle of a cord, she said. 51 hours. Dale nodded once. Slowly. The way a man nods when a thing he was hoping was wrong turns out to be exactly as right as he feared. He opened a comm channel to the Council's Emergency Coordination Office. Standard protocol. Priority escalation request. He filed it carefully, correctly, with every supporting data point attached. The Carver Bell's location, the sweep. Results, Nadia's chemical trace, the trajectory model. Clear. Complete. Impossible to misread. The automated response came back in 4 minutes. Estimated response time, 41 hours. He read it twice. Closed the channel. All right then, he said. He turned to Pete. Get me a full inventory of everything we're carrying that is not standard diplomatic load. To Lou, I need to know what the Carver and the Dolores may have in their cargo holds. Everything. Don't ask why yet. To Nadia, I need the shrouds. Communication frequency. Whatever we have. Whatever anyone has. Nadia blinked. What are you going to do with it? Don't know yet. He pulled the star charts up on the main display. But I want it. She looked at him for a moment. Then she sat down at the console and started working. She did not open her notebook. There was no point writing things down when there was no time to look back at them. Pete began running the inventory. Lou went back to engineering. The Arden turned slowly and began moving. Not back to Cradle of Accord. Not yet. Toward the last known position in the shroud's trajectory, closer to the thing, rather than away from it, which was either brave or stupid, and which Dale had decided did not matter because it was necessary. And in the quiet of the corridor, the bridge away from the screens and the work, there was a sound, so faint that no one on the bridge could hear it. It came from the direction of the carver. Bell already shrinking behind them, not a signal, not a frequency that mapped to any known communication band. More like white noise with a direction to it, like something that breathed very slowly and very large had turned just slightly to face them. It was getting louder by very small amounts. Louder all the same. The Grand Council chamber was in session when Dale walked down from the gallery. He had not been invited to the floor. He had not been granted speaking rights. He had not filed the required pre-session petition, had not submitted a formal agenda item, had not requested an audience through the 7-step process that the council's procedural charter required of provisional members who wished to address the body. He stood up from his gallery seat and walked to the stairs. Nadia stood up behind him without a word. Below on the chamber floor, Servalaneth was midway through a presentation on resource allocation in the mid-band transit corridors. 3 of his limbs were folded. One was extended, pointing at a projected map. The chamber was listening with the particular quality of attention that meant everyone already knew what the conclusion would be and was simply waiting for it to be said. The security drones noticed Dale before the delegates did. 3 of them, flat disc-shaped, hovering at about chest height, broke from their patrol positions and moved to intercept. They positioned themselves between Dale and the chamber floor in a neat triangle, their sensor lights shifting from ambient blue to a cautionary amber. Dale walked through the triangle, not around it, through it between 2 of the drones, close enough that they had to pivot to keep up with him. They recalibrated, shifted back to amber, waited for him to do something that justified escalation. He did not touch anything. He did not move fast. He walked like a man who had somewhere to be and had already decided that the things in his way were not, ultimately, in his way. The chamber noticed him. Servalaneth stopped speaking. 41 delegates looked at the human crossing the chamber floor, a man in a standard Navy duty uniform, nothing remarkable about him, moving with a calm that was somehow worse than aggression would have been. Aggression could be categorized. This was harder to categorize. He reached the council table. He placed a data chip on the surface in front of Servalaneth. "Play it," he said. One of Servalaneth's aides moved toward the chip. Servalaneth stopped him with a small gesture. The ancient Veth looked at Dale. His face was not an angry face. It was an assessing face, the face of something very old and very intelligent, deciding what category to put this in. The provisional member, Surveilloneth, said in careful, perfect English, because he spoke every language worth speaking, will return to the observation gallery. The provisional member will not, Dale said. Silence. Play the chip, Dale said. Then I'll talk. Then you can have me removed if you want to. Surveilloneth looked at him for 4 more seconds. Then he nodded once at the aide. The holographic display at the center of the table lit up. The shroud's approach vector. The Carver Bell's position. The trajectory model. The chemical trace from Nadia's analysis. The Council's own archived file on the shroud pulled up alongside their 847 pages of documentation, their migratory feeding phenomenon classification, their footnote on page 602. Dale spoke for 4 minutes. He did not raise his voice. He did not use technical language when plain language would do, and plain language almost always did. He explained what the shroud were in, terms that required no background knowledge to understand. He explained what they had done to the Carver Bell. He explained their feeding pattern. Organic material only, no exceptions, no variation, no interest in anything that was not alive or had not been alive. He explained the trajectory model, and he explained what cradle of accord contained that the shroud would find interesting. Then he explained the Council's response. Time, 41 hours. He put the 2 numbers next to each other, the response time and the arrival window, and let the chamber do the subtraction. No one spoke. The Cathuric delegate, the small, feathered one from the gallery, the one whose eyes had found Nadia's during the trade session, had gone very still. The feathers were pressed flat and tight. The delegate's hands were folded on the table with the careful precision of someone keeping them from shaking. You are suggesting, Servalana said slowly, that we engage them militarily. No, Dale said. I'm telling you we already are. He held the Veth's gaze for a moment. Then he picked up the data chip from the table, put it in his pocket, and walked back toward the chamber exit. Nadia was waiting at the edge of the floor. She fell into step beside him without a word. Behind them the chamber erupted, not in shouting, because the Council did not shout, but in the urgent multilingual murmur of 41 people who had just had their afternoon rearranged around a fact they did not like. Lou Petty was in the corridor outside, with a bag over each shoulder. He handed one to Dale without being asked. Dale took it, slung it over his shoulder, did not look inside because he knew what was in it. Carv is ready, Lou said. Dolores May crew is a little nervous, but they're running pre-flight. How nervous? Nervous enough to be careful, not nervous enough to say no. Lou shrugged. Honest people. Behind them, the chamber doors opened. Footsteps, small and quick. The Kethri delegate came through the doors at something between a walk and a run, undignified, feathers slightly raised, eyes wide. The delegate grabbed Nadia's arm with both small hands. We knew, the delegate said in accented English, voice low and urgent. We have known for a long time. The Veth told us the humans would not. That you were past, that there was no need to. Nadia looked at the delegate's hands on her arm. looked at the delegate's face. Past what, she asked, though her voice said she already knew. Past your old ways. Your fighting ways. The delegate's grip tightened slightly. They said you had grown beyond it. That you were safe. That there was no value in. Honey, Nadia said. The delegate stopped. We are never past it, Nadia said. Not angry. Not proud. Just the way you say a thing that is true and has always been true and requires no feeling attached to it to make it real. She gently removed the delegate's hands from her arm. She kept walking. Dale was already ahead of her, come out. Talking to Pete in low, specific numbers, distances, burn times, intercept angles. The language of a man solving a geometry problem, except the geometry problem had 400 dead in a 51-hour window. The Cathari delegate stood in the corridor and watched them go. Back in the chamber, Sir Valaneth had pulled up every feed the station had. External sensors, traffic monitors, deep range passive array. His aide was running models. The models were not cooperating. The models had been built to predict the behavior of known council species in known conflict scenarios. They did not have a parameter for what they were watching, which was 3 human ships repositioning without filing a flight plan, their crews working with the specific unhurried speed of people who have done the thing they are about to do before in training 100 times, until it became a thing they could do in the dark. What are they doing? Sir Valaneth asked. His aide ran the model again. The model does not, the aide began. The variables do not accommodate. Try, Sir Valaneth said. The model tried. It returned a probability estimate so low that it expressed as a rounding error. Sir Valaneth looked at the 3 small ships repositioning in his external feed, the Ardent, the Carif, the battered civilian hauler Dolers May, with its improvised weapons array that should not have worked and clearly did. He looked at them for a long time. Run it again, he said. Sir, run it again. The model ran again. The same rounding error looked back at him. Outside against the black Dalehurst's wedding ring caught the light once as he raised his comm. Then his hand closed around it and he gave the order, and the 3 ships began to move, not away from the thing that had eaten 400 people without leaving a mark, but straight at it at speed with the quiet purpose of species that had been waiting without knowing it was waiting for exactly this moment. The shroud did not look like a weapon. That was the thing. It did not look like an army. It did not have a front line or a formation or a command structure that sensors could map. It was 3 km wide roughly, and it moved through space the way a slow tide moves, over flat ground with the absolute patience of something that had never once been in a hurry, because hurrying implied that something might get away. In 60 years of documentation, nothing had gotten away. There had been no reason to rush. Sir Valaneth watched it on the feed from the station's deep-range sensors and felt, for the first time in a political career that spanned more years than most council species lived, something that he had no clean word for. Not fear. The Veth did not fear, but there was something adjacent to it. A feeling like reaching for a door handle and finding empty space where the handle should have been. Beside him, his aide was running the models again. They were still not cooperating. On the feed, the 3 human ships were moving, the Arden leading the caravel. On its right flank the Dolers may. Slightly behind and to the left. Covering the angle. They were moving fast. Not fleeing. Moving toward the shroud in a configuration that Servalaneth's tactical system kept trying to classify. And kept failing to because the configuration was not in its database. Nothing in the database had ever moved toward the shroud. What is the Dolers May? One of the delegates asked from behind Servalaneth. That is not a military vessel. It is a civilian cargo hauler, the aide said. Converted. The weapons array appears to be improvised. A pause. How improvised? Significantly, the aide said. In the corridor outside engineering on. The Ardent, Lupetti was walking back from his third check of the strike package. Granola bar in hand, humming something. Low and tuneless, an old song from the Mississippi Delta that his grandmother had sung while hanging laundry and that he had never known the name of. He ducked through the engineering hatch. Ran his eyes over the 4 active systems on his board, adjusted 1.2 degrees and hummed another bar. Pete's voice came over the comm from the bridge. Lou, Arden is 30 seconds from intercept. Range. Good enough, Lou said. He sat down at his station and kept humming. On the bridge, Dale stood at the forward viewport with his hands behind his back. The shroud was visible now without the sensor feed, a darkness within the darkness, a shifting stain at the edge of the star field large enough that looking at it made the eye want to look away the way very deep water looks from a height. It moved. It was always moving. Very slowly. Very certainly. Nadia, Dale said. 3 more minutes, she said from the sensor console. She had been at the console for 6 hours. 6 hours of steady, specific, focused work building something out of the shroud's own communication frequency. The one that Dale had asked her to find. Back on the Carver Bell. She had found it. She had done a great deal more than find it. Her notebook was closed on the console edge. She had not opened it once. There had been no point. The Carver's captain, a woman named Grace Odom, steady, 34 years in service, who had been given the situation brief in 40 words and had asked 0 questions, confirmed intercept position on the comm channel. The Dolers Me's captain confirmed. After her. He was not a Navy man. He was a cargo hauler named Ray, 51 years old, from somewhere in Louisiana, who had been told what was coming and what they were doing, and who had looked at his crew of 12 and said quietly, "Well, I guess we are." Dale had liked him immediately. "On my mark," Dale said. "Combined package. Arden runs the primary strike. Carev covers the secondary spread. Dolores May targets the outer edge. Ray, your job is the flank. You make sure nothing bends around us." Ray's voice came back over the comm. Louisiana flat and unhurried. "Copy that." In the council chamber, Servalaneth. Watch the feed go white. Not an explosion. Not a detonation. The strike package that the Ardent ran was not a weapon that the council had ever seen used, because it had not been designed against any species in the council's threat register. It was a combined system. Electromagnetic, kinetic, thermal, built for a specific kind of target. Built 60 years ago. Updated quietly in every generation of human military hardware since, without fanfare, without ever being entered into the Joint Weapons Registry that Council Members were technically required to file, because a provisional member did not have full filing requirements, because the council had never checked. The feed cleared. The shroud was still there, still moving, but it had contracted, pulled inward. A kilometer-wide piece of its outer edge had simply stopped, gone still in a way that was categorically different from its normal motion. The care of secondary spread hit the contracted section while it was still. Then the Dolores May caught the flank. The shroud lurched. The word was wrong. The shroud did not have a shape that lurched, but it was the only word that the station's feed could render into something Sir Velonith's mind could hold. It moved in a way that was not its normal motion. It shifted inward toward its own center, the way a hand closes. "It's reacting," Pete said on the ardent bridge voice even. "Good," Dale said. "Nadia." "Ready," she said. She sent the signal. It ran on the shroud's own communication frequency, the white noise with direction sound that had been getting louder since the Carver bell, translated, now modified, amplified by the Ardens' full comm array into something that said, in whatever language the shroud used for the concept, a specific and simple thing. It said, "Look behind me. Look at what is there. Not a colony." The signal did not say colony. The chemical markers Nadia had woven into the broadcast were specific species. Identification tags, the same ones a predator would read when mapping territory. The signal said, "The organisms behind me are the origin point of this weapon. They have been building this weapon for 60 years. They built it for something exactly like you, in case something like you ever came. They were not surprised to see you. They were ready." The shroud went still. The entire mass of it, 3 km of shifting patient ancient hunger, went completely still for the first time in any recorded observation of the species. Then it retreated. In the council chamber, no one said anything for a very long time. Sir Velanath watched the feed. The 3 human ships held their position, did not pursue, did not reposition, just held the line while the shroud pulled back and back and back, until the deep-range sensors could no longer track it. Lupe ran a system check. Pete updated the ship's log with the action time. Ray on the Dolores May checked on his 12 crew members one by one. Grace Odom on the Carver sent one line over the command channel to Dale. "Good enough." "Good enough," Dale sent back. Sir Velanath turned from the feed. His chamber was very quiet. 41 delegates and their aides and all the apparatus of the Galactic Convergence Council sitting in a room that had just watched 3 ships, one of them a converted cargo hauler crewed by 12 people from Louisiana who very much had not signed up for this, do what the entire council had not been able to model, predict, or prevent. He said to his aide, quietly, "We categorized them incorrectly." The aide said, "Yes." Surveillance said, "Significantly." He looked back at the feed. The 3 ships were still out there, holding position, small against the black, waiting to be sure the thing was gone. They would hold that position for another 2 hours. Dalehurst had decided that before anyone asked him, because he was the kind of person who thought about the thing that could still go wrong even after the thing that had already gone wrong had been handled. Outside in the engineering bay of the Ardent, Lou Petty finished his system Jack started a new one, hummed another bar of the song with no name, and began, quietly and without telling anyone, to sketch a modification to the strike package on the back of a maintenance log. Something bigger. For next time, 3 days later, the gallery was empty. This was because Dalehurst, Nadia Cross, and Lou Petty were sitting at the council table. They had not been invited. No formal session had been called for them. No procedural petition had been filed. No 7-step process completed. Dale had simply walked down from the gallery when the session began, taken a seat at the long curved table where the delegates of 17 species sat, and put his hands flat on the surface in front of him. Nadia had sat to his left. Lou had sat to his right, still in his work clothes, a slight smudge of engineering grease that he had not bothered to clean. The security drones had moved toward them. Surveillance had raised one limb. Slowly, the drones had stopped. Nobody had asked the humans to move. Nobody, looking at the three of them seated at the table, had found the right words for asking. There was something in the way they sat. Not aggressive, not performative, just there, present, immovable in the specific way of people who had already decided that being asked to leave was a theoretical problem they would handle if it became a real one that made the question feel like a poor use of everyone's time. The session opened. The agenda had one item: review of the Shroud threat classification and the question of humanity's strategic role within the council framework. Sir Valaneth, from his seat at the head of the table, looked at Dale. "You may speak," he said, as if it were his to give. "She'll speak first," Dale said. Nadia opened her notebook. She read from it for 9 minutes. Not in the formal register of a council address, no rhetorical flourish, no diplomatic softening. She read her own notes in her own voice, the way a doctor reads a chart. The past 72 hours catalogued. The Carver Bell. The sweep results. The trajectory model. The council's 41-hour response time. The 6 hours she had spent building the signal from the Shroud's own frequency. The 3 ships. Ray and his 12 crew from the Dolars. May, who were currently docked at Cradle of Accord and had submitted a repair request and a very modest invoice. She read the number of humans who had died on the Carver Bell. She did not editorialize. She did not need to. When she finished, she closed the notebook and looked up. Across the table, the Cathar delegates' feathers were very flat. An outer band delegate, broad, four-armed, a species called the wren, who had been on the council for 200 years, said carefully, "The human response was not anticipated." "No," Nadia agreed. "The weapon system you deployed, it is not in the joint registry." "No," Dale said. "It's not." A pause. The delegate's 4 hands rested on the table in a way that suggested a careful choosing of next words. "The charter requires." "The charter," Dale said, "applies to full members." He looked at the delegate without any particular expression. "We are provisional." The word sat in the room. Everyone in the room had used that word. Everyone in the room had been comfortable with it for 60 years in the way people are comfortable with arrangements that benefit them without being obviously cruel. Provisional. A word that meant not quite, not yet, not ready. A word that had a door in it, a door left slightly open always so you could Never quite stop believing you might walk through it someday. Dale did not raise his voice. He said, "We want a seat. A real one. No gallery. No provisional. Full membership, full filing. Requirements, full access." The Wren delegate looked at Sir Veloneth. Several other delegates looked at Sir Veloneth. He was looking at Dale. And the shroud file, Dale continued. All of it. Every page. Every footnote. Every settlement that was logged under acceptable attrition. The room went a degree quieter. And one honest answer, Dale said. Two. One question. Sir Veloneth waited. How many others, Dale said, did you file under acceptable attrition? He held Sir Veloneth's gaze. Did not look away. Did not fill the silence that followed with anything, because he was a man who understood that silence at the right moment was the most load-bearing thing in a room. Sir Veloneth was quiet for a long moment. The kind of quiet that came not from having nothing to say, but from choosing carefully to stop hiding behind the shape of what you were going to say. Then he answered. He did not give a number. He gave a category, a formal designation, a council archival classification that most delegates in the room had never looked up, because it was not a classification that anyone with a comfortable seat at the table needed to look up. The classification had subcategories. The subcategories had their own designations. Each designation had its own files. The Cathari delegates' hands, folded on the table, were very still. Dale listened to all of it. His face did not change. He had suspected it would be something like this, not a number, not a clean answer, but a system, a bureaucratic structure that had been in place long enough that the people inside it had stopped thinking of it as a choice. Systems were how good intentions became footnotes. He knew this. He had spent 60 years inside a system that had a word for him. Provisional. When Sir Veloneth finished, Dale nodded. Once. All right then, he said. That was the last thing he said. The council voted. It was unanimous. Not because they had decided in those 3 days that humanity was admirable. Not because the sight of 3 small ships holding a line against something ancient and enormous had moved them to generosity. Not because Natty's 9-minute recitation had shamed them, though it had, and they would not say so, and she did not need them to. They voted because Sir Veloneth, oldest member of the oldest species on the council, had looked at 3 humans sitting at his table, uninvited, unafraid, entirely unbothered by the theoretical possibility of being asked to leave, and had understood something that the models could not calculate and the charter did not have language for. He had understood that the category had been wrong, not slightly wrong, not wrong in a way that could be adjusted with a footnote or a reclassification, wrong in the way of something that had been looking at a thing for 60 years and had been seeing the entire time only the shape it expected. He had expected a species that had grown out of itself, a people that had put away its old nature the way you put away the tools of a trade you no longer practice. What he had gotten was something different, something that had kept every tool, maintained every edge, trained in every generation for a fight that had not come yet, and had not talked about it because talking about it was not the point. Being ready was the point. The fight might come or it might not, But if it came, you would not find them. Surprised, you would find them seated at a table, where they had not been invited. Hands flat, present, waiting to be useful. Nadia wrote something in her notebook. When the vote concluded, her pen moved for the first time in 3 days with the quick, certain motion of someone writing down something they do not want to forget. Nobody saw what the word was. She closed the notebook before Dale could glance over. Le Petit stood, stretched his back, and picked up the bag he had set at the base of his chair. He had a calm call to make, parts to requisition, some modifications to file. A conversation with Ray about the dollars that might turn into something interesting if Ray was open to it. He suspected Ray would be open to it. He walked out of the chamber without ceremony, down the corridor, past the gallery with its empty chairs, past the frosted glass ceiling where the starlight broke into colors with no names, past the room where Cole, the young diplomat, was sitting at a desk with his trade proposal files open, staring at nothing, learning the shape of something he had not been told would take this long to understand. Lou nodded at him as he passed. Cole nodded back. Outside in the docking bay, the Ardent sat with its running lights on, green and white, patient, waiting for whatever came next. There would be something next. There always was. The tools were maintained. The edges were kept. They were ready.